The disc landed at a ranch at Corona, New Mexico. The rancher turned it over to the Air Force. Rancher W.W. Brazil was the man who discovered the saucer.
What I thought was a star began coming in my direction at a very rapid rate of speed.
The unidentified object, which some sources thought might be a blimp, moved slowly down the Pacific coast from Santa Monica and disappeared south of Long Beach.
I saw a UFO, and it went down the river, turned right at the United Nations, turned left, and then down the river.
UFO classified.
UFO classified.
No more plausible deniability. Fact, fiction, or the truth. You decide. And now, the new voice of the high desert, the hostess of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes.
Okay, sweet. I love, my little sound studio is always, it's never a dull moment, as Tina knows. I am here tonight, and tonight is a show that is going to make history because we have somebody on that has a lot of information for us, and this is pivotal, especially right now with the games we're seeing at hand. With all of these UFO disclosures, it is imperative that we understand the history. We're going to learn about NICAP tonight. We're going to learn about the CIA, the government infiltration, and we are going to learn about an incredible man who has not done a radio show for quite some time. Gordon Lohr is in the house tonight. I want to thank Barry Greenwood for introducing me to Gordon. It is a pleasure, and I know that Gordon and I will be fast friends for the rest of our lives. Gordon Lohr began his professional writing, editing career as Vice President, Assistant Director, and Secretary-Treasurer of the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena, NICAP, then the world's largest UFO organization headed by the late Major Donald Keyhoe in the mid-1960s. He was responsible for heading a large scientific network of subcommittees which lent its expertise towards solving one of the primary mysteries of the 20th century and beyond. He played a prominent role in the first ever congressional day-long hearing on UFOs in September 1968, and he worked with the late Dr. James E. McDonald, Dr. J. Allen Hynek, and many others on the subject of UFOs in attempts to bring this to the scientific community and the general public. Gordon has so much to share. His life is full of meeting incredible people. He was pivotal with helping a 2001 Space Odyssey back in 1967 and advised to the story. And I can't wait to share this with you. He's had paranormal experiences. He was also, from 1971 to 74, writer-editor in the public utilities field, becoming a White House and Congressional Senate House Gallery correspondent. In 1975, he took the position of the editor of the Rockwell News, Rockwell International's employee newspaper, and wrote about numerous topics on the Apollo program, the space shuttle, and nuclear energy. He has also served in the White House. And Gordon, I just want to be quiet and let you talk. How cool is this that you're here? You're going to talk about your new book and give us a history lesson.
Well, Erica, you've just rewritten my resume for me.
There is so much. I can't believe what you have accomplished in your life and what a diverse background. I mean, I'm sitting here with Connections, a lifetime journey through the world of celebrity, in which you talk about UFOs, NICAP, the CIA, and then I'm also, one of my favorite go-to books is Strange Effects from UFOs, a NICAP special report, and Fran Ridge actually sent this copy to me, and these are both.
Wonderful.
I've looked at this, the Strange Effects from UFOs for over a year now, and it's my go-to reference. And so to finally meet you and to have the opportunity to learn from you, it's a pleasure.
Well, thank you so much, Erica. It's a pleasure to welcome you to the to the wide and wonderful world of UFOs, which you've been in a long time anyhow, and for coming into my own life.
I know, I love it. We've had a couple great conversations. I look forward to having many more, and you've had such an interesting background with UFOs, with paranormal phenomena. I mean, all of these things It's amazing how they weave together. And you, more than anybody, understands that. And I want to also mention Mysteries of the Skies, UFOs in Perspective. I actually have 2 copies of that book, and both of them were sent to me by, thanks to Barry Greenwood, and they were sent from the Center of UFO Studies, Ufos.
Well, wonderful, good.
Oh, I love it.
Well, it was great getting back in contact with Barry Greenwood again, as well as Fran Ridge at the NICAP website, yeah.
What a great group of people. And I will say, to me, as somebody, and I've only been public in this field for 5-6 years. For me, I've learned very, very quickly that we're not going to make progress unless we understand the importance of history, because all of you have been there before. You've seen the games, you've seen the way this works, and we've got a new generation coming into the field, and they are being exposed to absolute garbage. And they're being led down a potentially dangerous path, and they have to learn from the mistakes that you made, from the victories that you achieved, and it's really critical.
That's right, exactly. You put it very well.
Well, thank you. And I have to ask you, how did you first get into the subject?
Well, I first got into it by reading 2 of Major Donnelly Kehoe's books, Flying Saucers Are Real and Flying Saucers from Outer Space, and this was back in the 50s. Now, I lived in a small town on the Chesapeake Bay in southern Maryland, and I also had, at about that same time, my first of 3 personal UFO sightings, and it was a huge object that came over the Patuxent River, which is at the mouth of the Chesapeake Bay, and then dipped into the water and flew over where I was standing on a pier, and opened the bottom, and a whole bunch of water came out, and then it took off and disappeared again. And this was in 1955. And I had 2 more sightings in 1958, and then was hired at the NICAP offices in 1965.
And that must have been, I can't believe you were actually there. I can't believe that you got to meet all of these people who really broke ground, and people that I'm afraid a younger generation won't remember. So tell us.
I know. Yeah.
So tell us about, your first day on the job. Tell us about what that was like to walk into NICAP headquarters.
Well, I actually met Richard Hall, who was then the assistant director of NICAP in 1965. I was actually a folk singer at the Unicorn, which was a coffee house back in the 1960s, and Dick Hall came in there and heard me sing, and so he invited me to his apartment, where I believe he had a few friends as well, and by the end of that evening, he had hired me as a member of the NICAP staff, and so I joined the staff later that same week that I met him, and I was, of course, met soon after that Major Donnelly Kehoe, which many younger people who are listening may not be familiar with, but he was the man who actually started all of this by writing the first ever article on the subject and the first serious book on it, both called The Flying Saucers Are Real in 1950. And I just had a wonderful 5 years at NICAP, and then when that went under, I started my own UFO organization, UFO Research Associates.
So, and to me, again, I have to say that I wish I could go back in time, and I wish I could be there with all of you, because this was such a new thing, and there was so much going on, and we know that the government was and still is very interested in, I think, steering the narrative or discrediting researchers or pushing things, distracting people. And so, when we talk about NICAP, can you tell us the first inkling that you had that something was off?
Something was off as far as the CIA was concerned?
Yes.
Well, actually, let me give you a little bit of background first. Actually, I tried to tell Major Kehoe was that when something was off in a real manner was when a new staff member, Stuart Nixon, came in on the staff of NICAP during the summer of 1967. He was sort of a cocky young man who told me that he had something. He was there to coordinate some changes that will need to be made, he told me. And then I asked him what that was, and he suddenly drew back as if he had said too much. And I began to think, my God, is this guy a plant, And we knew that our phones had been bugged even before that time. We didn't know exactly who, but I asked him what changes he was talking about and who sent him there, and he says, "Oh, never mind. Sorry, I shouldn't have said anything. I'm just help you guys through the rough times." And so a red flag had been sent up at that point, and I asked Major Kehoe if he thought that Nixon might possibly be a UFO plant, and he said, "Oh no, he wasn't smart enough for that." But the fact is that Admiral Roscoe Hillenkoetter, who was the first chairman of the NICAP Board of Governors, was a classmate of Kehoe's and a friend who they graduated together in the 1919 class at the U.S. Naval Academy, and Hillenkoetter later became the first director of the CIA. As it turned out, the later chairman of the board of governors for NICAP was also a member of the CIA, Joseph O'Brien, and a few others as well. So the CIA had sort of connections with NICAP, very active ones right from the start. But for some reason, Kehoe, who became a very good friend and mentor, as did Dick Hall, neither were really convinced that it was a CIA takeover. But I believe it was.
And that is interesting, and I want to delve into more of that. But when you got in there and you were really investigating cases, meeting the people that were actively involved, what sort of things were you pursuing, and how did you want to make a change?
Well, what sort of things I was pursuing? Well, I was just trying to pursue, because NICAP had always been in very tight financial situations, and Kehoe, as great as he was, I mean, he was the man that started it all. He was a good friend and mentor, but he was also not very good at managing finances. So we continuously had financial problems, which we had to call upon members to sort of bail us out there. But I tried to persuade both Hall and Kehoe that there was something going on here that we need to really take a look at. And I was convinced that Stuart Nixon was also a CIA plant, but they didn't think that was the case. And so it was very difficult to try to persuade them otherwise. Of course, we were involved with the University of Colorado UFO project, which we thought initially was going to do a good job, but then it later turned out that they were just towing the Air Force line and put out a very negative report in early 1969 that sort of forecast the demise of NICAP later at the end of that year. But it wasn't anything specific. It was just more or less of a feeling that I had, and a few things like Nixon and others. Also, William McIntyre was a UFO photographer who also had connections with NICAP, as did several members of the board. I mean, a connection with the CIA, as did several members of the board, including Dewey Fournay and others. But beyond that, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say, and I have to ask you, when people were coming into your lives and when you saw Colorado and the Condon Committee, who was working at NICAP at the time, and how did you come to the realization that this was going downhill?
Well, when they first came out in 1967, when they first started the University of Colorado project and under Dr. Edward Condon, it sounded like he had a bunch of really interesting scientists on board, and that they were going to do a credible report. So we worked with them for about a year and sent them many of our best cases. But then we began to get feelings that they were taking a negative turn. And there were a couple of people like that, Dr. David Saunders and others, and Dr. James McDonald, who became a good NICAP friend. He was an atmospheric physicist at the University of Arizona who helped both us at NICAP and the Colorado project. And we began to get feelers that they were not going to do the positive thing and do a straightforward report or investigation of the subject. And so when we eventually found out that they were going to take the negative Air Force stand, we cut off any further communication or providing them with UFO reports. And that, of course, helped to make NICAP sink by the end of 1969 into 1970.
And that must have absolutely, because you had a handful of people that were working there with you that had a vested interest in this, that absolutely believed that this was something that needed to be presented to the whole world. It needed to be scientifically studied. And
exactly.
And I can't imagine, when living through, the Condon era, that must have been frustrating. And I think it more is coming to light now and will continue to come to light about how corrupt that whole thing was, and how they had a vested interest in really discrediting good scientific research.
Yes, exactly. You put it very well, indeed.
With Dr. James McDonald, and I want to, because he is such what a brave, incredible human being. I mean, if people don't know about him, go ahead.
Yeah. No, he spent many evenings at our home in Bethesda when he came into Washington, and he was ready to. He had gathered information over just a short period of time. I mean, that man just worked. his mind was active 24 hours a day, you know, and he worked 20 hours a day. I think he got about 4 hours of sleep every night. There's many nights we stood up talking about UFOs and other things as well, but of course he had a tragic ending. He apparently took his own life, but he was also pursued by people. I remember him telling us that on more than one occasion he was on board an airplane flight, and he would put a briefcase down with some UFO material later, and then he would fall asleep or something, and then when he woke up, he saw the briefcase, only somebody had exchanged it with exactly the same briefcase and had taken his away. And he said he also mentioned that he had been followed by strange vans around his home in Arizona. So there was something going on there. But he did a tremendous amount of research in only a few short years. I mean, his knowledge of the subject was incredible, and he told us at the time, Dick Hall and myself, at our home, that he was just about ready to work on publishing his own book when only a few months later he was discovered dead in the Arizona desert. And that was really a sad time for us indeed.
I can't imagine how all of you felt.
You're familiar with Anne. She wrote
absolutely, Firestorm.
A great book about his life called Firestorm. Yes,
It is great, and I've looked at that. I've read it so many times, especially because he did such great work digging into Utah cases. You know,
exactly.
I mean, Delbert Newhouse. I mean, all of these incredible the Blue Book cases and things, and that's something that I want to talk about. We're getting ready to take a break, and I want to just say I know that the rest of the show is going to be incredible because you have pivotal information for us. I am Erica Lukes here with Gordon Lohr. We're going to take a quick break. The best is yet to come. We will be right back.
This is UFO Classified with Erica Lukes.
Erica Lukes.
The phone lines are open now at 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio. More UFO Classified.
UFO Classified
with Erica Lukes on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. After this.
Saturday nights live on this station, it's a ride into the parabnormal. From aliens to UFOs, Bigfoot, ghosts, and anything else you just can't explain. I'm Jeremy Scott. I'll entertain you with 3 hours of conversation every Saturday night, somewhere between abnormal and paranormal. Join me for Into the Parabnormal.
Live Saturday nights from 6 to 9 on the KCOR Digital Radio Network.
The all-new KCOR Digital Radio Network.
Great. Make a note of it. It's great.
KCOR Las Vegas.
All the time.
Of course I listen.
I listen all day. It's the best music.
KCOR, the new underground source for news, talk, and music at KCORradio.com. Tell your friends, email them, or Facebook them, or Twitter them.
Hey, are we done here? Because I'm losing my buzz.
Hi, Vancouver. George Norrie here, inviting you to join me and producer Tom Danheiser on June 30th at the 4th Annual Architects of the New Paradigm Conference. This will be a groundbreaking, jam-packed event featuring Stephen Bassett, Grant Cameron, Richard Dolan, Daniel Sheehan, Johnny Enoch, and Victor Vigiani. You don't want to miss this one, so watch the 3-minute video and get tickets at anpconference.com. That's anpconference.com. anpconference.com.
What is the government hiding? and why? The Truth hits the airwaves Friday night, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern, with Mac Maloney's Military X-Files.
That's the craziest thing I've ever heard.
Plunge deep into the paper trail of classified files. Unlock the secrets the government's been hiding for years. From UFOs to conspiracies, they've got you covered.
With us this morning in the KGFL studios is a local rancher who has a startling story to tell. You found something on your ranch? Some kind of debris?
This wasn't just any debris, sir. This was some metal like nothing I'd ever seen before. This was something from another world.
Mac Maloney's Military X-Files, hosted by Mac Maloney, Commander Cobra, and Juan Juan, along with regular correspondent Switchblade Steve Ward and Emily M. They go where no one else dares to go. Mac Maloney's Military X-Files, now airing Friday night, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern, on the KCOR Digital Radio Network.
At any given moment, your ability to keep your mouth shut, and if necessary, to lie through your teeth, may very well determine the course of history.
They know what's really out there. Shouldn't you?
You're listening to
UFO Classified with Erica Lukes, where the truth isn't hidden beneath the black lines of a Sharpie.
That's the craziest thing I've ever heard.
To be on with Erica, call 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio.
Radio contact.
Share your thoughts on the show on Twitter by using hashtag KCOR. Or head over to the live chats at KCORradio.com.
The audience goes nuts.
And now, your host of UFO Classified.
Are you ready?
Erica Lukes.
Erica Lukes.
Welcome back again. I am here with somebody who has lived through so much, who has incredible information to tell us about the beginnings of this field and all of the games at hand, all of the good research, the incredible people that dedicated their lives to making sure that we preserve history, to pushing the boundaries. I love it. Gordon Lohr is here, and he is an author, co-author, and editor of several UFO books and several thousand UFO and other articles, including spiritual phenomena, Eastern mysticism, and much more. He wrote a very great book that I've got 2 copies of. I'm just gonna make you jealous here. Mysteries of the Skies, in UFOs in Perspective. Strange Effects from UFOs. If you can get out there and get that book, you've got to find it. It's used, but you need to get it. It might cost a little bit of money. Definitely something to put in your library. And then Gordon has a new book coming out, which we are going to talk about, that is going to be off the hook. When we were here before, and we were talking before the break, we were talking about NICAP, the CIA infiltration, and Dr. James McDonald, who was an important fixture, who did a lot of groundbreaking work for us and ended up, unfortunately, passing away in an untimely suicide. But Gordon, you were mentioning that he felt there were times where he was being followed by strange vans, where he was on airplanes and his briefcase would be replaced with something that had no information that he had in his briefcase. So continue telling us a little bit about that. You spent time, private time, with Dr. James McDonald. What else did you learn from him?
Well, I learned that not only, McDonald first came into our NICAP offices about 1967, I think, and my wife, Marty, and I were there at the time, and he said he had gotten interested in the subject and would like to spend time. He spent about 2 hours going through our files, and he was really hooked. And he says, well, there's something really going on here, and I want to devote my time to it. And in 2 years, he had really gathered a wealth of information. And he was also very interested in other things, not only UFOs, but in certain aspects of psychic phenomena. We also did table tipping and rod divining, which he was interested in. Matter of fact, it was funny, the table tipping, the table actually started to vibrate and shake, and McDonald, in his close-knit investigatory manner, would crawl under the table and look up and look all around and see if he could find any reason why the table would tip.
I love that.
Remarkable. I mean, he was really a very close friend. When we heard of his apparent suicide in 1971, we were just shocked beyond belief, I'll tell you.
And I think the really interesting thing is, when you research this, I mean, you and I both know that you can't be so closed off that you don't realize there are other things going on. And, for me, I have looked into different, occult practices. I believe that the paranormal aspect, all of these things play off of each other. And I think it's really a disservice for people to try to put things in a box, because there is no box for this subject.
Very true, very true. And I think I mentioned before, I tell you, I was involved. I have a bachelor's degree in metaphysics myself, and I was involved with a metaphysical group, and the president of that group even did an exorcism of the house that my wife and I lived in California, here in California, yeah. So it kind of mixes in there together.
It does. And I think that especially when you have a UFO sighting, typically from what I am researching and understanding, once you have a UFO sighting, your life is, that's the way it goes. You have several UFO sightings, you have paranormal experiences around you. And so I think it's perplexing, and I want to know. I mean, you mentioned 2 of the UFO sightings that you had. Talk about some of the paranormal experiences that also played into your life.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I came upon a group in New Mexico when we lived there in Taos, New Mexico, that were heavily into the paranormal, and we did a lot of studying and researching with them. And through an outside entity that came through somebody who was living there at the time. And so I did for 5 years, I did their, I was the editor of their publication called Ascent to Freedom. And but my own experience came with when my wife and I were living in California, and we had an evil entity that entered our home and had to be actually exorcised by the president of the American National Institute for Psychical Research and Development, Dr. Antonio Rodriguez. And this was an entity that invaded our home, and it was really unnerving for several months. As a matter of fact, we heard loud bangings in the middle of the night against the wall of our house, and then we'd go out and find that the wall facing our pool was filled with literally millions of black beetles. And the next day, they were totally gone. Then the following night, the same thing happened, and then things started happening, like the pictures started falling off the walls, which we could see. Even our 3 cats were actually thrown over the divan in our living room. We saw strange people come to the door and then disappear before we could get there. And then I had some pictures hanging on the wall, and some ectoplasm began to form on 1 or 2 of those pictures. But then we had Dr. Rodriguez come in and do an exorcism of the home in September of 1985. And after that, all of that disappeared and the house was cleared. She said that it was entity, if you got my book Connections, you'll see a picture of it that resembled Asmodeus, who was supposed to be an evil entity. And then a face of what looked eerily like Amadeus appeared on our door immediately following the exorcism. So it's things like that which kind of mix in there.
They absolutely do, and I think that it's challenging for somebody who is in the UFO field to actually have the courage to say, hey, there's something else going on and we need to pay attention to that. I think for some,
exactly.
So I commend you for doing that. And in your book, Connections, A Lifetime Journey Through the World of Celebrity, you talk about all of your amazing experiences, but then the NICAP days and then the paranormal experiences. And as being somebody who's had UFO experiences and paranormal experiences, it is a pretty mind-blowing thing. So when you were working at NICAP and you were really involved in all of this, did you have any paranormal things happen at that time?
Not particularly at NICAP, no. The paranormal stuff came more or less later, when I got into the subject more deeply, starting in the late 80s to from the mid to late 80s. When my wife and I moved to Taos, New Mexico in 1984, and it was then when we got involved with the spiritual entity there. We began to really go into it full force for a couple of years there. And we had this entity that apparently came through someone in New Mexico who doesn't want to be named. And then we got involved in a chapter that I call in the book, Chaco Canyon High, Ecstasy in New Mexico, with a very spiritual guy who was the godfather of the drug MDMA, which was ecstasy. And we went through a period there where we were involved in the University of Washington clinical trials on MDMA or ecstasy. But then 3 months into the 6-month trial, we had to give it up because the FDA put it on the no-no list, right up there with marijuana and cocaine and LSD and heroin.
Wow, that must have been
actually, ecstasy in its pure MDMA form was helping a lot of people, and even trials are being made even today from people with, particularly veterans of the wars that have come back, and it's really helped them a lot. But the trouble is, if you stay away from it from the street, if anybody tries to sell you ecstasy from the street, be very careful, because actually it could kill you. If you take too much of the stuff, you could warm up, overheat, and actually die. And there have been a few deaths associated with it. So I wouldn't recommend it to anybody unless they got it from a very reliable source. And
like I say, you've had a very diverse life and experienced so much. It is amazing. And again, I have to just tell people they have to go get Connections, your book, A Lifetime Journey Through the World of Celebrity, because it is just never a dull moment. And if anybody could live a life, it's got to be like yours.
Well, thank you so much. Well, I still have a few copies. I can sell at a somewhat of a reduced rate. If they want to contact me directly, can do that as well. It was published by Bear Manor Media and through Ben Omart, who's done a remarkable job in building up a celebrity-based publishing company over the past 20 years or so.
Well, I love it. And I have to say that I just love, looking at what you wrote to me. So this will forever be very special to me, and I love learning from your life. And so I have to say we've got about 12 minutes before we go to break, and I want to go back to a little bit about the strange effects from UFOs and mysteries of the skies, UFOs in perspective. Again, two books that I recommend people getting because they are collector's items and you need to have them in your library.
Well, now you can't really get them through because they've long been out of print. This was 50 years ago. But they are being sold, both of them, on eBay and Amazon. Just go. They're all used books, but they are still being sold on eBay and Amazon.
They are, and that's where you... And that's where I get all of my used books. I mean, I'm so grateful to Barry and Mary from Ufos and Fran Ridge and Jen Aldrich, who have graciously helped build my library. And these books are in my library. And with the strange effects from UFOs, talk about how that came into being and some of the things that you learned when you were putting this book together.
Well, actually, it came into being because, you see, it wasn't until really that book was published that Major Kehoe wanted to even admit that NICAP had reports where occupants were actually seen inside these vehicles or in connection with them. Now, there was a very high-profile case. You're familiar with the Sakura, New Mexico case of Lonnie Zamora in April
absolutely.
Of 1964. Yeah, and we have a huge file on that. One of my chapters in my current book is devoted solely to that case, where three small occupants were seen outside of a landed UFO outside of Sakura, New Mexico, and then took off in a flash and ran over only a few feet above a building where Lonnie Zamora was. But at first he was ridiculed and then became a very credible witness. And there was cases like that we built up where occupants were seen and over the years, but they weren't released until Strange Effects from UFOs. And that's only a small portion of the number of cases that we had. It's a small book, and but we had some advisors who, in the fields of the paranormal, psychologists, psychiatrists, and other people who lent their expertise to examining these cases. And I happened to write that book, and it was an NICAP publication, and it's still being, it's still out there these days after more than 50 years, as is Mysteries of the Skies.
And these are important books. I love it. Like I've said, I love looking in this book because I see cases I never had a clue about, and they're really pivotal cases. So who was advising you when you wrote this book? Who were the people that contributed?
McDonald had Dr. McDonald was one of the advisors, and you had Stuart Radford, I think was his name. Some others. My memory's kind of poor right now, so I'm trying to dig out who was some of the advisors. I don't have that book in front of me right now. There were a number of people associated with NICAP who were actually NICAP people like that we had as advisors to us and who did investigatory work with us. And there were quite a few, so...
Oh, that's amazing. And I'm just looking through the table of contents and some of the things in this book. I mean, you've got animal reactions, object frightens dogs, UFO light beam frightens observers, burned area impressions found, pioneer woman sees UFOs, object leaves crater-like depression, ball lightning theory. I mean, all of these things which are you see today, and all of these cases remind me a lot of the research I'm doing with regard to Skinwalker Ranch in the Uinta Basin.
I'll be darned. Well, very good. Excellent.
It is. I love this. I love putting the pieces of the puzzle together, and it just thrills me beyond belief. And I look at the Mysteries of the Sky, UFOs in Perspective, which is the first fully documented history of UFOs taken directly from the files of the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena. And you discuss the airships, the great airship mystery.
Yeah, a wave of 1896 and 97. True. Yep. Yeah, it was the first a book ever based strictly on the past history of UFOs, going back for centuries. And of course, the modern era of UFOs began supposedly with the famous Kenneth Arnold sighting in 1947 over in Washington State, where he saw 9 disc-shaped objects while he was flying in his plane there. He was a private pilot at the time. And of course, that started the modern era of the UFOs, which is still going on.
But as you know, I mean, there is so much more to this. I mean, this has been going on, I believe, since the beginning of recorded history. And there are those who tend to think that this happened, when the Kenneth Arnold sighting took place or when the Roswell crash occurred. And there's an important history to all of this. And you have highlighted that. Dr. Jacques Vallée has mentioned that and has done significant work with regard to that.
Yes, exactly. It's very true. It's been going on for untold centuries, really. As I'm sure you read in Mysteries of the Skies, my co-author and I covered periods that were... there was even a case in 17th century Boston area where a barge was actually pulled upstream by a UFO overhead. And that's in Mysteries of the Skies as well. That's a very interesting case because it is so old. And so it's indication of something there with a propulsion system that was able to actually drag something on the ground there in the 1600s. And there were cases like that. There were a lot of sightings at sea. Matter of fact, one of my full chapters in it is strictly about sightings at sea that go back. I even went through the National Archives in Washington, D.C. and pulled out old ship's logs of captains who had seen discs at sea back in the 19th century and even sometimes before that. And they had them there right in the National Archives and handwritten by the captains of the ships themselves. So there's a lot of information there that are buried in such files as that that we still don't know about. So I was able to bring some of those to the fore.
Oh, I love that. And I think that this, for me, I've spent the past week at the University of Utah Library digging through the special archives of Dr. Frank Salisbury. And you just think, nobody's done this before. And it's just like the National Archives. You get in there and you look and you're holding a document that that nobody has really paid attention to, that is absolutely pivotal. And I can't imagine, well, I mean, I know that you feel me on this because you've done that. And you've got that aha moment when everything just hits you and you think, this is absolutely incredible. And we need to get more people doing this. It takes work, but we have to get in there and go to our local places and make sure that we're preserving history. I have to ask you, because Barry Greenwood we are just chatting, and he wants me to ask you about the Battle of LA, which is another really cool and important moment in history. And we're going to talk about that when we get back. But again, talk just really quick before we go to break. Give us a little snippet about your new book.
The new book is called Flying Saucers from Beyond the Earth, a UFO Researcher's Odyssey. It'll be published by Bear Manor Media on October 1st of this year. And it has to do with a lot of the things we've just been discussing, but it mainly covers my 5 years with NICAP and my 10 years with my own organization, UFO Research Associates. And I had that in various locations because my wife and I moved about quite a bit in those years, so we had headquarters in starting Washington, D.C., then Bethesda, Maryland.
And I've got to cut you off right there because we've got to take a break. I am Erica Lukes here with Gordon Lore. Stick around. We've got another half. The best is yet to come.
Listen very carefully.
This is Houston. Say again, please. Houston, we've had a problem.
This is UFO Classified, live every Friday night, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. The truth is out there, just waiting to be discovered.
And now, if you will, accompany me on a journey to the future.
For more information on the host of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes, upcoming guests, as well as links to the past shows,
visit her website at ufoclassified.com.
UFO Classified.
UFO Classified.
This is KCOR Las Vegas, home of the Digital Radio Network, broadcasting from a shack just south of Area 51.
Wait, that doesn't exist.
This is the KCOR Digital Radio Network. Now for the news.
Now, broadcasting in digital HD radio.
The disc landed at a ranch at Corona, New Mexico. The rancher turned it over to the Air Force. Rancher W.W. Brazell was the man who discovered the saucer.
What I thought was a star began coming in my direction at a very rapid rate of speed.
The unidentified object, which some sources thought might be a blimp, moved slowly down the Pacific coast from Santa Monica and disappeared south of Long Beach.
I saw a UFO, and it went down the river, turned right at the United Nations, turned left, and then down the river.
UFO Classified.
UFO Classified.
No more plausible deniability. Fact, fiction, or the truth. You decide. And now, the new voice of the high desert, the hostess of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes.
Well, welcome back and happy Fantopia Friday. I'm Erica Lukes, always happy to be here, opening up the evening on the best, most respectable network out there. I love Tina Marie, who is my producer and the station owner. She does an incredible job. I have to say, last weekend, I wasn't here. I was at the Utah UFO Festival where I represented Utah, and that made me so happy because there is a lot of history, a lot of information going on, and it is my mission to get good information out to everyone and to represent the people who have worked so hard in Utah to make sure we're preserving history and understanding that, yes, there is a vested interest. And guess what? The Pentagon did allocate $22 million to study Skinwalker Ranch. So, we're going to just keep that out there. My guest this evening is Gordon Lore, who has a great deal of information to share, and I know that he's going to be back again and again, especially when his new book comes out. But he began his professional writing and editing career as Vice President, Assistant Director, and Secretary Treasurer of the National Investigations Committee on the Aerial Phenomena, NICAP. And we're talking about some of his work and Kehoe. And I want to talk to you, Gordon, because on the break, of course, we have the most pivotal conversations on the break. But you were mentioning the fact that you understood pretty quickly that there were people, intelligence, and you were being monitored. So can you give us the stories about the two incidents where you were bugged and what you and Kehoe did?
Yeah. Well, the first, which I've already explained, but but that part may have been cut off, right? Where Kehoe and I set up a fake UFO report that was later published by the Air Force in its Project Blue Book report, as well as the phone conversation where Major Hector Quintanilla, the head of Project Blue Book, interrupted us on our phone call.
And that's because we were on break. So we were on break. We were on break,
I kept talking into the vacuum, didn't I?
No, I loved it though, because this is why I love what happens on breaks. But I want you to.
Well, I'd go through it all again. That'd be fine.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, well, I asked Kehoe early on. I said, I'm getting a little bit concerned because I think that we actually might be being kept tabs on by the U.S. government, Project Blue Book, or even the CIA. And of course, the CIA sort of infiltrated NICAP right from the beginning, because the first director of the CIA, Admiral Hillenkoetter, was the chairman of the Board of Governors when NICAP came into existence, and then a lot of other people involved there. But in the first place, Kehoe and I were in a phone conversation. He lived about 100 miles south of NICAP in Luray, Virginia. And all of a sudden we heard a clicking sound, and a voice came on saying, well, Major Quintanilla, this is Don Kehoe's outfit. And then another click. And so we knew that they were bugging our phone. And the second incident occurred when Kehoe wanted to make up a false report and then talk about it, and which we did. It was a UFO sighting that was not true at all, but it involved electromagnetic effects and occupants and landing and marks on the ground and all that sort of thing. And sure enough, that report showed up in a future Project Blue Book report, and there was nothing true about it at all.
So could you give more specifics on that Blue Book report?
No, that's pretty much it.
Okay.
It was a report where where we said that a UFO had come down somewhere, I believe it was in Virginia, and that people reported they had seen UFO occupants, and that there were markings on the ground that officials were noticing, and so on. That's about all I remember at this point. It's been over 50 years, so.
Well, we've got to do some digging on that.
Yeah, it was a total fake report that, no, we had no record of it, no written record that I know of, unless Kehoe did something. There was something there, too, Kehoe was fired along with myself when and I'm convinced it was a UFO takeover of NICAP in 1969, at the end of 1969 into 1970. And people are still wondering Major Kehoe must have had a large UFO file at his home, but no one's apparently discovered it, if that's the case. And I wasn't aware of that until later, but I think people like Barry Greenwood and all would be, and Fran Ridge would be very interested if that was the case. Have you heard anything about that yourself?
No, I haven't, but we need to look further into this. Absolutely.
Indeed, yeah. Because, Fran Ridge has done a wonderful job with the NICAP website, building that up, but I don't think he knows either whether Kehoe had a huge stack of a personal file of his own.
So I have to ask you about the trace evidence, because there was trace evidence that was coming into NICAP. Where did that go to?
By trace evidence, you mean what?
So when you were investigating sightings, and you were out in the field and investigating and picking up things to bring back samples.
Yeah. Well, the one I was most involved with was the case, and as a matter of fact, if you have a copy of Connections there, you'll see me taking measurements at that site. It was a case that in April of 1967 in South Hill, Virginia, which is just above the North Carolina border, where Clifton Crowder, a warehouse manager and a tobacco farmer, I think his name was Norman Thomas or something like that, spotted a UFO that landed on the macadam surface. Now, it was a small one. It wasn't one of these huge UFOs, but it was a relatively small one, and then on 4 stilt-like legs, and then took off rapidly up into the air, leaving burned-out areas on the ground. And NICAP members, Don Berliner and Leon Katchen and myself, at Dick Hall's behest, made a quick trip to South Hill, Virginia, and we took all the measurements of the site and whatnot. But the UFOs were seen, and then it took off and went straight over the trees and out of sight. There were other sightings in the area as well, but that was one of the few. Now, I didn't go out on many personal UFO trips myself, because my main job at NICAP was to handle the 35 or so UFO subcommittees around the world. So my main job would be, besides being the assistant editor of the UFO Investigator, would be to farm out sighting reports that people in the field, such as Barry Greenwood and others, would go out and investigate these cases for us. They were members of our subcommittees, 35 or so subcommittees. Another was involved a case in Wanacue, New Jersey, where a UFO came over a reservoir, scooped up a bunch of water, and then left. They were seen by police officers and others. Still another case was a case in Maryland that I investigated, which was actually not far from my own home there in Maryland, where a UFO was seen by a school teacher that lit up the inside of her house, vibrated her house, and then took off. There were certain cases like that I did investigate.
And so, and I have to ask you, because you understood, you and a couple others understood that there was a real serious game at hand, and that you better get in there and start Xeroxing files. So will you tell us about that? Who was involved and what happened in that process?
Well, the thing is, we sort of knew that, particularly with the advent of the Condon report from the University of Colorado, the negative report, and the fact that NICAP finances were going downhill fast, and the fact that Stuart Dixon was on board, and I was convinced he was a CIA agent. I even asked about Dick Hall and Don Berliner and a few others, I think, about it. And Dick, for some reason, didn't want to believe that there was any CIA influence there, even though he was the one that permitted 2 CIA agents, before I even came on board sometime in the early 60s, that they could peruse the NICAP files. That time and thereafter, we had about 12,000 files. Now, that's a small number compared to the files that people have today. But back then, there was no computers or anything like that we had, that we could put in just, all the files you could find somewhere. But we began to be concerned that NICAP was on its last legs. And we thought that it could well be a CIA takeover. So we began to make Xerox copies of as many of the files we could. I have a large file myself of some original material from the famous Heflin photo case of 1965, and the case of the Beaver County of Olympic lights taken by Carl Hart, an 18-year-old boy in 1951 of the lights over Lubbock, Texas, and also the Coast Guard case in Massachusetts, near where Barry lives, a Coast Guardman that photographed a UFO over the Coast Guard headquarters there in Salem, Massachusetts. So there are a number of cases like that we wanted to keep on from being taken over by whoever was going to take over NICAP. And sure enough, by the end of that year, Keogh and I were let go. So that's pretty much it. We there are files out there. Dick Hall had a lot of them. I know Don Berliner had some, and Isabel Davis, who was from the Civilian Saucer Intelligence of New York, was on the staff. She made some copies of the files as well. So they're spread out over there. I was talking with Barry Greenwood about the possibility of trying to get those somehow and all together so they can be saved by people such as yourself and Barry and Fran Ridge and others. So now I got to take a breath here.
Well, and it's really critical, and it's interesting to try to talk about the Kehoe, the hidden files, because I think there's a whole mythology built up around this. I mean, one person says something, and then that might not be factual about where it is, and yada yada. So I think this is going to be a good little mystery for Barry, yourself, all of us to try to solve. And I look forward to that.
To be a part of that, because I was wondering, and there's there is somebody, Lindy Powell on the east coast of England is doing the first ever biography of Kehoe. Now Kehoe, like Alan Hynek, and Alan Hynek never had a biography of him done until last year, and then and this year Lindy is writing the first ever biography of Kehoe, and she was wondering the same thing. Where did all of this information go? She's gotten a lot of it herself, but she knows a lot of it is missing. And that Kehoe must have had a stash of reports of his own that he was keeping at his home in Virginia. And that seems to have all disappeared after his death.
Well, this will be interesting to see what happens, and I think this sounds like a good mystery that we need to solve for all of our sakes. Absolutely. Let's do it.
I know. There were times at NICAP when I was there, we thought, my God, how, when the UFO waves of 1967, 66, 67, into 68, I remember that I stayed up sometimes till 4 o'clock in the morning at NICAP headquarters, fielding calls from people as far away as Germany or England and, Australia. There was just a tremendous amount of interest back then. And of course, we had sacks of mail that were so big that the mailman would bring them in twice a day and just pile them on our floor, and we had to go through literally thousands of sacks of envelopes to find out just what was in those huge sacks. And it was incredible there for a while.
And I honestly, I would just love to look through some of those reports. I mean, people actually taking the time to write in. There were probably some beautiful drawings in there, and people who were having such traumatic and profound experiences that they would take the time to do that and put themselves out there. I mean, that must have been overwhelming for you to see all of that mail.
Indeed, exactly. And I have a number of those photos, and particularly a lot of those sketches and drawings from the witnesses themselves in my new book, Flying Saucers from Beyond the Earth, and which will be published on October 1st of this year. So really looking forward to seeing the and Barry Greenwood and others have written some wonderful advance praises for the book as well.
Well, we are all in support of you, and it is so cool for me to have the opportunity to get your information out, because every story that you tell and every connection that you make is something that is new for all of us who are getting into the field. I love it.
Well, thank you so much, and it's wonderful getting back in touch with you and to know of your great interest and the great work you've done on the subject as well. So just hang in there with it.
Oh,
Keep your eyes on the skies.
And we've got just a couple minutes before break, and Libertas, who asks amazing questions, wants to know why should we take Kehoe seriously when he was on the other side? What is your response to that?
Who said that?
So it's a person in my chat room who's just a loyal listener, has got incredible questions to ask, and he feels that Kehoe was on the other side, and so why should we take what he had to say seriously? And you would know better than anyone.
Okay, but what other side was he referring to? I'm a little puzzled by that.
You know what? I'm assuming that he means intelligence, that Kehoe was kind of playing both sides and maybe wasn't straight up with things.
Oh, I see. Okay, yeah, I can answer that. An hour, or should we wait a few minutes?
You know what? Actually, we've got like 3 minutes, so I bet you could just give us a good go.
Oh, okay. So you have about 3 minutes before the break, huh?
Yes, we do.
Oh, great. All right. No, I'm not quite sure what this individual means, but you should believe him and other serious investigators in the subject now, including Dr. Hynek, Dr. Jacques Vallée, those who have departed us, Jim McDonnell, Major Kehoe, and all, and the huge amassment of now millions of bona fide UFO sightings that have occurred in particularly ever since the Kenneth Arnold event in 1947, and also the ATTIP, a program from the Pentagon, has all but actually come out and admitted that flying saucers are manned by intelligent beings from outer space. I mean, already come as close as possible of saying that without actually coming out and saying so in so many words. But
and thank
that,
you.
I don't quite, if somebody like that would just look at the serious side of it, go back to the Jim McDonald stuff, all the magnificent stuff he put out there, and so much sense that people like Fran Ridge and Barry Greenwood and yourself and others have built up on the positive side of it, backed up by good scientific material, instead of paying attention to all the kooks and people like that who are still out there and still operating,
Absolutely, absolutely, and thank you, because, and I have to say that, I mean, Kehoe, I don't believe, you don't believe that he was a quote-unquote spook, and perhaps that, read the books from the 50s. I am Erica Lukes here with Gordon Moore. We've got half an hour left, so stick around.
Stand by.
This is UFO Classified with Erica Lukes.
Erica Lukes.
The phone lines are open now at 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio. More UFO Classified.
UFO Classified.
With Erica Lukes on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. After this.
One of the planet's most powerful antioxidant products is here for you to enjoy. Chaga mushroom tea. This tea has been used as a potent natural health solution for thousands of years. In fact, the Chinese call it king of the herbs. The health value alone is worth a look, as Chaga mushroom tea packs a punch with pure vitality and smooth energy. It's 100% wild-crafted, safe, and effective. Get it now at arcticchaga.com. That's ARCTICCHAGA.com. Or call 916-969-2678. That's 916-969-2678. Chaga Mushroom Tea. Chaga Mushroom Tea. Order your supply today.
Friday night, 9 p.m. Pacific. Jump onto the Celestial Highway and travel at the speed of light. Into hyperspace. Hyperspace. Hosted by Solaris Blue Raven. She navigates you through the cosmic tides of mysticism into the world of covert technology, UFOs, mystical sciences, and the world of unforeseen forces.
You get to really sort of enjoy a bizarre ride.
Listen live, Friday night, 9 p.m. Pacific.
For Hyperspace.
The one show that blows the whistle off our government black ops projects. Hyperspace. Hosted by Solaris Blue Raven.
Solaris Blue Raven.
Exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network.
Want to take a ride?
This is the world-famous KCOR.
That's the only station I listen to.
There is a world outside that which we live in. A realm where fact and fiction collide. The Paradigm Matrix.
The Paradigm Matrix.
Hosted by Willie Miranda. Every Friday night at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern.
The Matrix is everywhere. It is all around us. Even now, in this very room.
The 1 hour show that will surely leave you hanging on the edge of the rabbit hole.
The Paradigm Matrix
explores a universe of topics from UFOs, cryptozoology, conspiracies, as well as all things paranormal.
Enter a world of the twisted and deformed.
Friday night, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. The Paradigm Matrix. Exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network, where fact and fiction collide.
You're listening to
UFO Classified with Erica Lukes, where the truth isn't hidden beneath the black lines of a Sharpie.
That's the craziest thing I've ever heard.
To be on with Erica, call 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. 9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio.
Radio contact.
Share your thoughts on the show on Twitter by using hashtag KCOR. Or head over to the live chats at KCORradio.com.
The audience goes nuts.
And now, your host of UFO Classified.
Are you ready?
Erica Lukes.
Welcome back to a fantastic night on Fantopia Friday on KCOR, the best radio station all over the planet. I have to say that I have listened to other paranormal UFO radio stations or networks, and none of them have the credibility that KCOR has. I'm incredibly proud to be a part of the KCOR team. Willie Miranda is coming up next, and then you've got Tina Marie and Solaris Blue Raven. This is an exceptional network, and I'm just proud to be a part of it and to open up the Friday lineup. I am here tonight with Gordon Lohr, who has been investigating this subject, he was there with NICAP back in the 60s. He has seen Dr. James McDonald, and he heard his stories, and then witnessed the Lonnie Zamora case and all of these important things, met Kehoe. He's got so much information to share. He is going to be back. He has written books. He's got another one coming out, but I would definitely recommend getting Connections, A Lifetime Journey Through the World of Celebrities. If you can find Strange Effects from UFOs, a NICAP special report on Amazon, and Mysteries of the Skies, UFOs in Perspective, get them, add them to your library. So Gordon, welcome back. And we were talking about the fake case from Kehoe and different things, but you had mentioned, and there's so much to talk about. I mean, obviously we're going to have you back really quickly, but you were talking about something that happened with you and your wife when you were in New Mexico with regard to kind of some of the intimidation.
Yeah, there was a report to our newly formed New Mexico subcommittee of UFO Research Associates when we first moved there. Actually, it's in Albuquerque, and there was an excellent report of a man who was a member of the subcommittee who later took me aside. He was a retired lieutenant colonel whose name I have forgotten over these many years, and I don't have a record of it, but he was a retired lieutenant colonel who dragged me aside from even the other subcommittee members and sort of whispered in my ear. He says, Gordon, you know, I was on one of these crash and retrieval cases. I don't think it was Roswell, but I think there were a number of others that Leonard Stringfield, who was a good friend of NICAP, it was one of the cases he investigated, and he says, you know, Gordon, I was out in the desert, and as we finished our taking all this evidence on board trucks, I was pulled over to the side by a high-ranking officer. He didn't say who or how high the rank was, and he says, if you ever utter even one word about this, it's a large desert out there and your body will never be found. So that sort of sends shivers up my spine just saying it right now.
That's incredible.
I know, and he wouldn't let on who it was, you know. But he did indicate it was a high-ranking official of some sort or other. I just wonder how much of that has really been the case over the years.
So,
of course, Jim McDonald had some reference to it, even when he said he was followed around Phoenix, and Ann Druffel has this in her book as well, by mysterious black vans, you know. So a lot of that has been going on, and but you know, I hesitate to say, well, there's some diabolical government entity out there that's doing all this. I don't know. I really don't know. Whether we'll ever find out, who knows?
Well, and I have to ask you, and this is kind of going off the rails here a little bit, but I think this is very important. For me in my research, I have found that there is definitely, there are definite groups. There's a narrative that each group is trying to put forward, and I see when you look back historically that there was this ultra-conservative agenda that perhaps thought that this was demonic, and so they weren't going to really look at the subject, or they would, shut down funding. Did you ever find that there was perhaps any of that going on in NICAP or with any of the people that you dealt with?
Not specifically. No, it was more general than that as far as any outright organization. There was do you know the late Dr. Frank Stranges?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. Well, he came into the NICAP office one day, and he said it was kind of funny. I had a good time talking with him because I knew what he was doing and where he was from. But he was about something that was happening, and there's something going on today that's related to that, about UFOs that are ready to take over the Earth, but they have to cleanse the Earth first, and they have to take away certain people and take them into outer space and then return them to Earth once their bodies and minds have been cleansed. And Frank Stranges said that he had actually flown Adamski-like to the planet Venus and came back to Earth with a lovely Venusian and landed in the New Mexico desert. And I told him, I said, apparently, I said the fact that Venus has a surface temperature of 900 degrees Fahrenheit didn't bother you. He kind of cringed at that.
Oh, my God.
They reminded me of George Adamski, also.
But, do you...
Well, where was I? My mind's lost its track now.
Well, no, but we were talking about just... there are so many... Everyone has a belief system when they come into this. And I believe that people in different factions of the government have belief systems. Is this demonic? Is this evil? Is this extraterrestrial, interdimensional? What is truly behind the phenomena? And I wonder if, back in NICAP, if there was some sort of steering of the narrative based on religious beliefs.
No, not within NICAP headquarters itself, by any means. Matter of fact, Keogh wanted to stay strictly away from that, and because his main interest was to get congressional hearings on the subject, and he was able to do that on 2 different occasions in 66 and 68. And it wasn't until 69 and Strange Effects from UFOs that he was willing to admit that we even had bona fide occupant reports, stuff like that. Even though we had a large file, we did a huge investigation on the famed Betty and Barney Hill case of September of 1961. And but as far as I remember, there was no really input there at NICAP that there was some nefarious faction out to get us, except maybe the CIA. I hope they aren't listening to us right now. We're in trouble, Erica. Oh, my God.
Well, the black vans, I'll just
I know
bring it
the
on.
black van. Here, oh, my God, I see a black van pulling up to the gas station right behind.
Exactly.
I swear, right outside my window here. I live next to a gas station here.
Well, time to make up a fake case, and we'll put that out there and see where it goes. But
oh, my goodness.
No, it is interesting. And, we definitely know that, back in the 40s and 50s and 60s to present day that, the United States government did not want to admit that they had as much information as they do. And so it's refreshing to see what's going on. I believe with, To the Stars Academy, we'll see where it goes. Some people are skeptical about that. But what are your thoughts?
And they came as close as anybody has ever come before to admitting that, yes, these are extraterrestrial visitors, without actually coming out and saying so in so many words. But when you have a group that is actually setting up buildings to house extraterrestrial craft from somewhere or other, you've got to start rethinking things, Even the diehard skeptics are going to have to start doing that, I think. But let's see where the program goes right now, who knows?
Right, well, and that's the thing. And I know that people that have been in the field for a long time are looking, they're very hesitant because they've seen kind of some of these situations play out before, so they're not getting their hopes up. To me, as somebody who has not been in the field for decades, I'm looking at this and I'm seeing the Washington Post, the New York Times, all of these, Newsweek, all of these news agencies that are actually getting the issue out there and talking about declassified government documents and all of this. It's giving those of us who research a platform to get our information out there. And to me, that's a really critical and a beautiful thing. So I'm enjoying it.
No question about it. And thanks to people like you and Barry Greenwood and Fran and so many others out there that are really unsung heroes, that are trying to keep this alive. And the thing is now that, God knows, when my book, Mysteries of the Skies, was published, I don't think there were more than 20 or 25 really serious books on the in the world about the subject. There were a lot of other books by Adamski and Truman Bethurum and Orville Angelucci and others, whom we considered as sort of crackpots back in those days. But I know Barry in his book Clear Intent and so many others have really done great jobs in keeping the scientific investigation and others alive.
Isn't it? It's incredible, and I've got to ask you because we're getting ready to wind up, but the Battle of L.A., tell us a little bit.
Well, the Battle of L.A. took place in February of 1942, was it? My mind's a little bit... but it was... we had a person named Ray Anger who was a member of the NICAP staff, and he was our main witness. He was actually there during the Battle of L.A. when UFOs were seen. Now, UFOs could have been actual Japanese aircraft, but I think some of those sightings were probably that, but I think there were some that really could not be explained in that sense. But as you know, Pearl Harbor had been bombed only months before that. When did the Battle of L.A. take place?
It was 40. Yeah, you nailed it. It was 42.
Yeah, February 25th, 1942, if my memory serves. And Ray Angier was an aircraft worker who did double duty as an air raid warden. And he said, let's see, I'm kind of reading from something we have here. he told us, quote, it was in the early morning hours, about 2:30, when all hell hit Los Angeles. It was the damnedest surprise I ever got. Air raid sirens were screaming all over the city. Brother, this was the real thing. When I went running outside to make sure people had doused their lights and were heading for shelters, I saw what had triggered the alarm. A formation of 6 to 9 luminous white dots in triangular formation was visible in the northwest. The formation moved painfully slowly, you might call it leisurely, as it were oblivious to the whole stampede it had created. You'll never know what it was like. One minute the city was bedded down for the night. The next thing you know, the streets were swarming with air raid wardens, people going in both directions, and a lot of talk about the enemy overhead, and so on and so forth. But a lot of people saw those, and it could have been something that the Japanese had, but it could have been something else as well. It was all kind of unclear there because you did have these Japanese barrage balloons, and of course this was in 42. So it was only a few months after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, and we were so afraid that the Japanese were still going to invade us from the West Coast at that time.
Oh, and it's so interesting to me, and then to see that, this type of object that was seen over Los Angeles is the same type of object that is seen. Robert Hastings has done such great work about objects that are seen around nuclear missile silos and different places.
Yeah,
I've
exactly.
done research, about Dugway, which is 80 miles away from here, the world's largest biological and chemical weapons testing facility. And so it's the same types of objects that we are seeing. And I think historically, you look back and well, it's a skyhook balloon. It is,
right.
There are always these explanations of what it is, and then people don't ask questions beyond that.
Yeah, I have a full chapter on the Mantell case there. E. Garrison Wood, one of the main witnesses of the case, contacted me in New Mexico, said he read the first edition of my UFO research newsletter, and so gave me his phone number, and we talked on 2 different occasions, long telephone conversations, and he was convinced that Mantell was killed by going up, losing his oxygen at a high altitude, and then crashed after chasing a UFO. There were skyhook balloons that had been released, but there were also sighting reports. Fran Ridge pointed this out in his on his website, his NICAP website, and told me as well that there were UFO reports in that area at the same time. And so we were convinced that the final thing was that Mantell was chasing a UFO, and he described it as going at speeds up to 500 miles per hour. Well, skyhook balloons just don't travel that fast. Let's face it.
No. I had a mass sighting, here in Utah and in Colorado back in 2014,
Wow.
daytime sighting
Tell me.
hundreds of people, I got a call from Fox News, and they were saying, 2 in the afternoon, that people were observing 5 to 7 objects hovering. And this is like 2 hours at a time. And the really curious thing to me was, I started interviewing witnesses. People were saying that there were military aircraft on the periphery over in Colorado. They were chasing these objects, and these objects were behaving in ways that, normal conventional craft could not behave. So MUFON, God bless them. I don't even want to go there because everybody that listens knows how I feel about the ineptness of MUFON headquarters, but they tried to pass this off as a Google Loon balloon, which Googaloon balloons, those like the modern version of the skyhook balloon. Googaloon balloons typically have a transponder. They don't behave in a way that they would be hovering in place for upwards of an hour. They don't launch, 5 to 7 of them, and they're not going to do it over a densely populated area, and they're usually so high up that you can't see them. And I did extensive research on this and also did a FOIA request for radar data. Two times I got radar data back that was in unreadable text format. And thank goodness on my American Airlines case, which was a big radar case, Bill Puckett finally sent this to somebody, and they read that, and they were able to substantiate the fact that there were F-16s in the area, a lot of F-16s in the area. So there was something unusual going on. But again, that goes back to the fact that we are so willing to buy the company line and say that it is, oh, those are Chinese lanterns. Oh, that's a weather balloon. Oh, that's, A, B, C, and D. And that's not the case. And if we educate ourselves, we understand how mundane objects behave. We also understand that, the powers that be are going to feed us with a line of BS.
Exactly. Yep, I understand. Well, you sound like you've done a wonderful job. You've been more involved in it in the last few years, in getting out there and finding out what's really going on. Unfortunately, my old age and my I'm unable to travel because I'm handicapped with a scooter just to get around my apartment, so I can't really travel. And that's because I'd love to get out there and investigate more than I just haven't been able to do it in recent years. But thank God for people like you and Barry and Fran and others who are keeping it all alive.
But how cool is that, though? I mean, honestly, I think it's kind of a blessing that you took a break from this and actually had a normal life, but then you were able to give us, from all those years ago, you're able to retain that without all of this muddled nonsense that comes when you're in the field for so long, and I think that's a blessing. Yeah, well, it's been a book I've been wanting to write, my experiences at NICAP and UFOR, for a long time now, and I finally got the opportunity to do it. And Bear Manor Media and Ben Omart, the publisher there, were willing to publish it, and they're the same publisher that did Connections, which you have, and so hopefully it'll get out there. I know Barry told me that. He said there were a number of people that were anxiously awaiting the book and to get my take on it. And since the unfortunate passing of Dick Hall, was been about 10 years now or so ago, there's very few people left now on the original NICAP staff that have access to all this information. Well, I'm just going to have to come up and visit you and see all of the files and see, because we didn't even talk about the Carl Jung letter. Yeah, you're really going to have to do that, because I can't travel, and I'd love to see you, and I can show you everything I have in my files, and take you out to lunch at the Saugus Cafe, which is the most historical cafe in the state of California. It's also the place where James Dean had his last meal on September 30th, 1955. That's a little creepy, but that's okay. We can.
That's right. Well, the two presidents, Theodore Roosevelt and Benjamin Harrison, ate there as well.
Okay, well, then that's something more positive.
It's supposed to be the longest-running cafe, possibly in the whole state of California, but definitely in all of Los Angeles County.
Okay, well, I will come and visit you, and I just want to tell people, please go to gordonlore.com, and I will give information out, share the show, get history out there, and understand that there are games that are being played, the same types of games, so learn your history and get strange effects from UFOs, add that to your library. We're going to have Gordon back when he gets ready to release his new book. Gordon, thank you for being here.
Skies.
Yes, Mysteries of the Skies. Love it. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Erica, so very much. And
I love it.
And we'll talk later.
We'll talk later, and I hope all of you stick around for a great night on KCOR. I am Erica Lukes. Make sure you find me on UFOclassified.com or UFO Classified on Facebook. Send me your messages. Get out there, do research, question everything. Catch you next week.
Listen very carefully.
This is Houston. Say again, please.
Houston, we've had a problem.
This is UFO Classified, live every Friday night, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. The truth is out there, just waiting to be discovered.
And now, if you will, accompany me on a journey to the future.
For more information on the host of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes, upcoming guests, as well as links to the past shows,
visit her website at UFOclassified.com.
UFO Classified.
UFO Classified.
This is KCOR Las Vegas, home of the Digital Radio Network, broadcasting from